among the women, 23-year-old Julie Moss, the former college student from Los Ojos, California, had moved ahead of Pat Hines.
Moss came to the Ironman as a college student, just trying to get a degree. No one could have imagined she'd find herself in the lead so late in the race. The she Moss was asking about was Kathleen McCartney, who was in second place in the women's event, nearly 20 minutes behind Julie when the marathon began. As night fell in Kailua Kona, an exhausted Julie Moss was clearly in trouble. Quickly back on her feet, but again her body said no more. Moss would walk methodically down a Leahy Drive, now just a few hundred yards from the finish line. Just 30 yards from victory, Moss fights against a body that is shutting down. ABC's cameras captured this drama. As Moss struggled trying to balance as if on an earthquake, her worst fears were realised as Kathleen McCartney runs past her into first place, just yards from the finish. Unsure of her position and what had happened, McCartney had to be told she'd won by race volunteers at the finish. Moments later, Julie Moss crawled to the finish line in one of the most memorable moments in the history of ABC's Wide World of Sports. Millions of Americans watched mesmerised by Moss's courage and determination. Everyone who saw it was moved, and history has shown us that from that day forward, the Ironman would never be the same.
Here we go. So, thank you, Julie. That is really one of the most, it is the most inspiring Ironman I have ever seen. And you really have been an icon for all of us triathletes out there with your strength and perseverance. So I'd love you to just tell us your story from the beginning, how you even got into that Ironman. And also talk to us a little bit about your book.
Okay. First of all, hello. It looks like it's Stephen, IMA, Nicole. Hi, Brad, an old friend, Brad. Hi. And again, Hillary, thank you for having me.
And Irem.
Irem, thank you. Okay, well, it's chronicled in my book, obviously, because I was just such an unlikely candidate to do an Ironman event. The thumbnail story is I saw the Ironman on TV, thought it was crazy, but it was in Hawaii. And as a surfer girl from California, Hawaii, anything Hawaii got my attention. Good-looking men in Speedos also got my attention. The distances, I think I just blocked out, but somehow as a physical education major, even though I wasn't really a jock of any kind, it was an easy major at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, relatively easy major. I was there just to get my 4 years done, and I needed a senior project. And watching the Ironman in the winter of 1981, the year John Howard won the race, I thought, why don't I just do something like that? I needed this wide scoping, wide ranging senior project. I needed it to be something that was significant, and obviously Ironman sounded significant, but really it was just an easy way to get a trip to Hawaii. And hopefully get some surfing in. And I figure out how to train for this at some way. And like any school project, I put it on hold for months because I had no idea how to start. I mean, I'd done a little bit of jogging. My high school didn't have a swimming pool, but as a surfer, I was comfortable in open water. And then there was that cycling thing. Well, I had a bike. I had a 10-speed bike that I used to commute during college. So there were parts that were very familiar, but the discipline, the focus, the training, that I couldn't deal with. I was in college to have fun, and I picked a senior project that seemed like it had some fun elements. And the reality was I waited months to get going on the senior project. So when I finally realized I was panicking and I had to jump in and do some sort of training, I did a marathon based on, I think I'd run 8 miles total. And so I jumped in and did a marathon in, I guess it was November of, I'm trying to think. Yeah, November. The Ironman was in February of 1982. So here I'd seen, I'd watched in January or so the Ironman, January, February. Now here it is months later, and I'm finally getting around to doing something that at least I can say I ticked off this box. And so having run a total of 8 miles, or longest run of 8 miles, I jumped into the Auckland Marathon. It was pretty okay. I have a great attitude. That was my strength. Positive attitude, figure it out as you go, and got to about 20 miles before it got really awful. That then concluded all my classwork time at Cal Poly. All I had to do was get across the line in Kona, write up the paper, and turn it in. And so then I went home to Southern California, to my hometown of Carlsbad. Immediately tried to find another marathon to erase the bad memory of this one. So in early January, I found another marathon, got to 23 miles before it got really bad. And then I was literally on a plane a couple days later to get to Kona. Still hadn't ridden the Ironman distance, still hadn't swum the Ironman distance, but I'd run 2 marathons. So, that was very unorthodox training. The time when Brad and people who know what they're doing are starting to taper, I was really ramping up all my training. I had 3 weeks in Hawaii before the race, and I did the bulk of my training there. Those 3 weeks prior to the race. So that is how I came to be on the start line of the February 1982 Ironman. Just very unorthodox, very, very crazy, and again, with a great attitude. When I got to Hawaii, I was surrounded by these triathletes. I never had seen another triathlete other than on television. The sport was that new. And so to be around all those good-looking men in Speedos are now reaching out and helping me. And it was a very highly motivating atmosphere. And there I was, 3 weeks of training and ready to do my first Ironman.
How many people competed in that 1982 Ironman in Kona?
Yeah, in February, we had about 360 people, I think. So, wow. More than I would have guessed. So, that's why it felt like, oh my God, there's this whole city of triathletes. It felt really like there was a ton.
So you wrote a book about this experience, Crawl of Fame, which I reviewed, I think, last year. It's an awesome, awesome book. Yeah, show it again, Julie, so that if anybody, okay. It's an awesome book. So talk to us a little bit about the book.
Okay. Well, over and over again, I tell my story of going to Kona. And obviously the video became such an anthem for Ironman. And it put me in the front and center of a sport that was exploding. And time and time again, that video would be reshown. And it took me, it was a growing period for the sport. It was a growing period for me to accept that this was now going to be I was going to be part of this sport forever. The book really came about because I had so many people saying, you should write a book. And I would tell my story at a triathlon or at a meet, I'd be invited to speak and I'd tell my story and people would say, when is your book going to come out? And I thought, when I learn how to write. So that took about 30 years of procrastinating. And finally, I reconnected with a high school friend who was an established author, and Robert Yaling, and he and I together wrote this book. It was very much a collaborative effort. I put the stories, I think of it as a quilt. There were little squares of stories that Robert put together in the form of a book. So really great, like so happy to check that box when something's been hanging over your head for 30 years. It's kind of nice to check it.
It's like doing another Ironman, right?
Yeah. Just, sort of saying, okay, I'm starting, and one step at a time until you get to the finish line. So, yeah. But it was nice to, rather than being an individual sport, the way Ironman is, I had a teammate. That was really nice to be in concert with somebody.
Awesome. So tell us what you're doing now.
I am really in a transition period because I just had my 60th birthday. Actually my 61st birthday. And I really had set some very specific goals leading up to my 60th year as far as the sport goes. I was really back into the sport as a very competitive age group athlete. Sort of never really needed to be the very best in my age group, but definitely wanted to be a contender. The kind of training that I knew it would take to win my age group, like a Missy Lestrange year after year in Kona. I still didn't have that after all these years. I sort of wanted some of it, but I didn't know if I could go all in. And so what I did was I found a very aggressive, very time consuming way to create a huge base of training. And that seemed to do very well when it came to racing. So I raced in Kona in 2018. I was there for the 40th anniversary of the race. I was actually there in 2017 and had a DNF. And I'll circle back to that story because it was kind of key in getting the book published, to have a failure. And then that was the motivation to come back in 2018. And then in 2019, I spent the year doing half Ironmans and shared many of those experiences with my now 26-year-old son as he races an age group athlete. So I had decided that I needed to pay attention to some areas of, one area in particular of my body that was sort of saying, this training is brutal. It's my hip. And so as transitioning to spending a year to focus on my health and seeing what might be in store for me as far as getting my left hip up to speed, I had really planned this year to be kind of a down year in some ways, to work for Hoka One One, to be on the Ironman Foundation Board of Directors, to be an ambassador for Women for Tri, all these things that I could now devote more time and attention to because the training wasn't taking up 5-6 hours a day. So this is a transition that we're all in here, being sheltering in place, and it's a combination of me kind of transitioning to something very new and different, and then having to transition on top of that. So it happens to be a great time to rediscover who you are and reconnect and that. So talk to us a little bit about the mental aspect of the training. Okay, so you do this Ironman. I mean, you barely could get through it, but you were able to do this. I mean, and I think that's what gives us motivation. So can you talk to us a little bit about that, about the motivation, about some of the strategies that you've used through the years to help you get through these really tough races? I would say it's kind of in my DNA and my makeup that I'm probably, I would say, a pretty positive person. I tend to look at situations as opportunities. I tend to say yes before I think things through. Do you want to go jump off this trestle over by the, sure. I mean, with youth, it was maybe a little more reckless, but I really say yes more than I say no, to the point, and I really don't mind. I mean, I mind it, but I'm willing over and over again to go to the edge of my comfort zone and take the next step. And I think fear keeps us, we want to control things. You know, there's this fear base of making sure everything is okay before we lean into something new. I know for women, it's Sheryl Sandberg talked about leaning in. We want to know we're going to be successful before we try and be successful. I was probably the opposite of that. I was willing to just try things. And because I didn't have this perception of myself as being a super successful person, I just was willing to go there more often. I was just the average girl next door. And being average meant I could do sort of tried extraordinary things without risking too much. Of course, hindsight, I can see this now, but even as a young girl, I was gung-ho, you know, and that really served me in training for my first Ironman, because I really had no business being there. And to have the Ironman present itself with an opportunity that would allow me to just figure things out. It wasn't a well-known sport then, you know, so I had a positive attitude going to Hawaii. And I remember distinctly waking up the morning of the race thinking, I only have one thing I need to do. I need to get to the finish line. I mean, there was no idea in my brain about winning this race or placing a certain way. All I had to do was finish the race and graduate and then start my life. So I think when you break things down and sort of have a bottom line of what you're willing to do, and what I found during Ironman, especially in the last mile, was that mark kept moving. I was willing to do more and more and more to get to the finish line. And the more I would be mentally engaged in trying to get this done, or the more I was willing to dig past my comfort zone, my body responded. That was a secret. That's a mystery. That when you are all in mentally, your body will find a way to accommodate you.
It's amazing, right? It's absolutely amazing. So
it's really crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there a mantra or something that you say to yourself? You know, like, I know with me, I say, you could do it. You got this.
Mm-hmm.
I try to coach myself, you know, but what do you say to yourself?
I think there's a running dialogue of mantras. I think those mantras definitely come in handy in training, because you don't have the big reward at the end of a training day. It's just you. And one of my mantras is win-win. This is a win. Everything is a win. And because I'd say I'm not a really competitive person. My friends totally argue with that. But if someone's up ahead of me on the bike, I don't know them from Adam, but I chase them down and I win. And they have helped me find a way to find another gear. They never know it, but I've won that one. Or just getting on my bike some days, it's a win. But I do look at sort of not win fails, but it's just, I like the wins. You know, I like ticking those boxes of, I didn't give up. And so, I had if you want, I'll circle back to my story of failure and how it relates to the book, because that was a very different mantra in my head. In 2017, I'd had tremendous success. I was winning Ironmans in my age group. I was setting really fast times. And I then allowed myself to have the mantra of being a champion. You can go to Kona in October and you can go to be a champion. You deserve this. You have earned this. All your times are backing it up, and everything lined up beautifully until race day. And here I am going for a time. I wanted an impressive time. I was in the process of writing my book. I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a bold-faced headline saying, faster at 59 than she was at 23. Her time is better than it was 35 years ago. I got very caught up in this picture of what this was going to look like. And to me, it was so satisfying. Like, that's what's going to sell this book. And so I went out to do this, and we presented the book to some publishers, and a couple of their responses were, so she wins in the end, that's it. Well, what else is there? And so the response was a little lukewarm to me getting the finish that I didn't get in 1982, me getting the finish across the line, my arms up in victory. This book was going to do, and the race that I was going to do in 2017 was going to be that crowning moment, that champion moment. Well, I give myself credit for being so naive that this was going to be the end all beat all of this. And so I gamely started the race, and I was holding myself to very strict times. The swim, like I think a 1:04 in the swim. The bike had to be, under 6 hours, and it was an extremely difficult, windy day. And then I was going to figure out how to do a sub 4-hour marathon, and that was going to get me this sub 11-hour time. I got to Hawi, which for everyone watching, that's the halfway point of the bike ride in Kona. And then you turn around and you have a tailwind finally, and that's the easy part. My legs were cramping. I was already kind of blown up, at 60 miles into the bike ride. I'd made such a rookie mistake of going too hard and racing from the gun. So by the time I got to about 85 miles, I started bargaining myself. The mantra was, it was a negative mantra, but the mantra was, you didn't train this hard to finish this poorly. You trained to be a champion. You didn't train to just finish the Ironman. You can do that in your sleep. You came here to be a top contender. You don't have to start the run, but you have to finish the bike. I mean, I was bargaining just to finish the bike. I knew the run was going to be walking for a long time. It might have come back, it might not have, but it was not going to be a championship effort, and it didn't have the value to me to get to the finish line. There wasn't a value in that in this moment. So I got off the bike, spent about 12 minutes in transition to let everyone on their trackers know something was wrong. And then I walked up to my sponsor, Hoka One One, the sponsor of the marathon, and told them I quit. They were very gracious. I mean, I said I cramped, I wasn't able to run, blah, blah, blah. Mentally, I was fine. I could have figured out a way to get to the finish line, but not in a very fast manner. So I quit. So we resubmitted the book offer saying she quits, she fails, but I now am vowing to come back with the idea that I got it so wrong. I got it so wrong that a champion is somebody who figures out a way to not give up. And even if it's not the dream you wanted, you really have to figure out a way to really get through when things are out of your control, when things are not going the way you planned, when things are the worst. A champion figures out a way to rise up. And so the response to the publishers was, okay, now we've got a book that we like. Now we've got a story we can sink our teeth into. This now is much more interesting than Julie Moss gets her, her banner victory day. So 2018 was pretty amazing to have a new mantra. And now it's not just mental and physical, but it's now this spiritual component that comes in that really makes you feel like you are 100% committed to something. And it was gratitude for 1982 and giving me this experience that propelled me in the sport and in my life to find out that there's ways to dig down deep within yourself and discover the unlimited potential of the human spirit. And I had really traded that in 2017 for a headline that now looking back on it, it was like, well, yeah, you got what you deserve. You so underestimated yourself, this sport, what it brings to people. And I'm all about owning when I make a mistake. That has also served me well, is to let people know I have made a mistake. I am sorry. How can I fix this with you on a personal level? How can I fix this on a bigger level? And coming back to Kona and racing with gratitude was fixing something. I felt I'd let this sport down and myself in the process. process. So
Wow.
it was really, there was nothing about 2018 that wasn't stellar. The hard parts were okay. The easy parts were fast and enjoyable. I've never in an Ironman race said out loud in the lava fields, I'm enjoying this. I mean, I even said, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. I'm enjoying this. And then it got tough. And I won't use the word enjoyment because I'd say, but the deep satisfaction that I got from being in it, present, and just accountable for every step of this race was beyond my wildest expectations. Then, and as I'm coming to the finish line, I see my son is waiting for me. He's completed his very first Ironman in Kona. And just seeing my ex-husband, Mark Allen, who was there supporting my son and there, I think, on a very deep level to support our family. We haven't had that kind of relationship over the years since our divorce. And so it was a trifecta, boy, you know, swim, bike, and run your heart out, and then have that sort of mirrored back through on a very personal level with my family, have it mirrored back, just absorbing everyone else's race. And now to look back and see that bookend from 1982, very much alone and discovering things about myself. And then here in 2018 to be sharing that ability to dig down and to just challenge yourself and come out feeling like you couldn't have done it better.
It's awesome. Now, thank you for sharing that with us. I want to go back to a piece where you said, where you quit, right? Where you didn't finish this Ironman. And I'm sure that there have been races throughout your life where you start out and you just say, you know what, it's not going the right way, I'm out. But how do you get, and this happens to all of us, right? So how do you get through that? How do you get through that? You know what, I don't really care what anybody else thinks. I'm just going to finish this. How do you psych yourself up so that you finish and it doesn't really matter how you do in the end, as long as you finished it?
Yeah, I mean, that it changes all the time, right? I mean, I've had some DNFs in my career. One was a medical reason that I didn't understand what was going on in my body. Another was a very emotional connection to Mark Allen and Dave Scott when they were racing side by side. We were getting married in a month, and Mark had never won the Ironman, and I couldn't go past. Once we'd pass each other on the Queen K Highway, and he was running his last final miles to the finish line side by side with Dave Scott, I kept thinking, I don't know a reason to keep going forward when my heart is going the other direction, and my wedding will suck if he does not win this race. But what I think you're asking me is a kind of like every day, like how do and especially when you put time and energy into a race, right? Like I think about recently, the Korea friends were Kathleen McCartney, who beat me in 1982. Her son was trying to do his very first Ironman in Korea. And I'd encouraged them to go because that's where my son had done his qualifying race to get to Kona. It's just a gentle race. It's this beautiful setting, very rewarding. They got rain. They had a not a tornado, a hurricane come through. So here these people are not knowing, going to bed the night before the race and not knowing if they can get up with all that training, expense, energy, if they're going to be able to race. And they weren't. It was canceled. So I think about, there's times when it's taken from you, but when it's really still, you're still at the helm, you are in a race. I think somehow going back to Kona, that first year of racing, all I had to do was finish. That was going to be a huge accomplishment, the finish line. And so sometimes I get back to that, just getting to the finish line, whether it's getting back to my car on a training ride, whether it's getting, you know, finishing a run, whether it's in a race, if you can kind of peel back your ego and your expectations and find that sort of that bottom line of what you are willing to do. And when you start a race, you should be willing to finish it. And that doesn't always work out, but if you keep it simple, like I will feel like I won this when I cross the finish line. And then it starts to get, then you can start building back onto it. Well, if I can just pick my pace up, I might pass one more person, or I might be able to encourage one more person as I'm going by. Whatever it is that really motivates you, then you should be kind of bringing that to the start of something. I'm saying you shouldn't leave it to chance. And so if you know there's a chance that this is going to be a tough day, you could say have your mantras, have your, you know, your index card of mantras tucked away, you know, stored safely away in the back of your mind, to know that you're maybe going to have to pull them out and use them. Rarely do we do a race where we do not have to pull out something, right? So yeah, I think it's maybe, how do you just sort of do it, prepare for that the way you do your training. You know, that's the emotional, spiritual side of training. There's the physical, but then there's the other. And now over time, I don't have to worry whether I've got all my tools, you know, on my tool belt, emotionally, mentally. I know they're there. I know that when I do the right kind of training over years and years of doing this, I can rely on the fact that I will scramble and figure out a way to get to the end of my training, to the end of a race, which was why 2017 was such an anomaly, because I had just thrown out everything that had worked in the past and focused on one set of criteria for success. It was so limiting. And I think when you expand your world to include being a champion, as well as being a champion for your effort. I wanted to just be a champion. I wasn't willing to be a champion for whatever effort I could bring on the day. So and go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say is let's bring that to today, okay? So we've got all these races canceling. You know, everyone's locked in their houses. You know, you almost feel like, what for, right? Like, is there going to be a race this year? What for? Why do we continue to train, right? So what's your response to that?
Well, my response is, and it's interesting because I'm in this unique position when I didn't plan to train for anything in particular this year, and I've got a hip that's saying I can't train. I am so envious of all the people who can go for a run to kind of get to dispel some cabin fever, who can go for a bike ride, who can sort of be banking. I look at it as banking physical fitness for down the road. When I plan for a race, I usually plan about 2 years in advance. That's to me, at my age, if I want to do a half Ironman or an Ironman, it's 2 years down the road. So I'm looking at what I can do now to build for later. So what's the point of training now? You can. Your body, you don't know when your body is going to have different ideas. And so to any time that you can celebrate your fitness, and really it's the daily stuff that gives you the base, then to maybe take springboard into a big goal. This daily is kind of the basis of our health, our mental health, our physical health. It's the fountain of youth. This idea that just the idea of you being able to kick your leg over your bike and go for a ride, doesn't that make you feel a little bit like a kid in some way?
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's everything. Why do this now when you don't have, I think races are kind of, now they're sort of, when I'm in it, of course, it's like, it's everything, but it's really the day-to-day of accomplishing the goals. Racing is the icing on the cake. The work is done. We ask about mental. When the race day comes along, that's 95% of your day. The 5% that you've been banking day after day, after month, after maybe years is there. Trust it. So somehow it's this tying in of, I think the physical preparation you make day in and day out allows you to trust your future, to be able to do the things you dream about doing.
Wow, you've really provided us with some great tips. So a couple of things that you said before was have a positive attitude and figure it out as you go.
Yeah, and say yes to things that challenge you. Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else that you can think of?
I think kind of playing around with, because of a lot of my early life was dealt with physical. Then I went through a divorce that challenged me to reconfigure my life in a way. And I was very much steeped in fear during this period of my life. And I will talk about that in the book. And I did a lot of personal work to kind of get in and figure out fear and how that can just wreak havoc with you. And what brought me out of fear was to jump back into an Ironman, because one, it's my comfort zone to just sort of get out of my head and be physical and let my body teach me that I am strong, I am courageous, and then let my mind follow along. So I think to learn how to flip the switch quickly, it serves you very well when you're in the midst of a long event like a half Ironman or an Ironman. But to flip that switch and to figure out really fast when things aren't going right, there's something that is going right. If you're starting to, have problems on the bike with either your salt isn't right because you're starting to get some twinges in your legs, you're getting grumpy, your attitude isn't great. These are your body's really basic ways of saying, take more salt, get more calories. So in life, we're not in that extreme situation, but you can still say, this person is really giving me some negative energy. Let me remove myself from the situation. Positive languaging, it's that every day you have an opportunity to use your language to be positive. And these little things I think are really helpful right now when we are running out of projects around our house. We're sort of, the busyness that's been sustaining us for the first few weeks is now starting to dwindle. And so what do we have now is a chance to really put into practice being able to flip your switch and stay positive. And thank goodness for those of you who can go for a bike ride, who can go for a run. I just dug out my son. I remember when he was in junior lifeguards, he did this 7-minute ab workout. So I found it online. So now I'm thinking, well, this is I do not have an excuse right now to not have the abs of my dreams, so it's little things.
Share away.
Not there yet. Catch me in a month.
Just last question, and I'm going to open up to the group.
Right.
And I know I asked you this before. So you're married to Mark Allen. The two of you are power couple, right? I mean, You are a power couple at the time, right? And you have a son. How does your son feel like living up to the two of you? It's like, has he exceeded, or how did that pan out?
Well, we were so absorbed in our own careers that we were always traveling. So our kid did not get a really traditional upbringing. He didn't get a chance to exercise his athletic skills early on. He was not in Little League or, swimming on a swim team. So his athletic prowess, whatever that was going to be, was really up to him to kind of discover. And he sort of started finding that in junior high and high school. He did his first Ironman at 17, or half Ironman at 17. And he did very well, and he was invited to go to Kona. It was when Vineman, you could qualify for an Ironman or a half Ironman back in the early 2000s. And so he was so excited he had won his age group. He was very excited about winning his age group in his first half Ironman. And I mean, this is a kid who had to learn how to ride a bike literally to go do a half Ironman. So he had the natural endurance there. He was also playing water polo and running some cross country, so he had some of the tools. But the bike, he really had to figure out how to ride that to do his first Ironman. He rode an old bike of his father's. And so he was on this trajectory of seeing himself in Kona in October. Unfortunately, he didn't turn 18. He turned 18 a few weeks after the Ironman, so they told him he couldn't compete. And then that dream evaporated. He didn't pursue it after that. I think he saw himself as being one of the youngest competitors ever in Hawaii, and that was his way of getting out from under his parents, that umbrella of that we kind of cast, the shade we cast on him. He found his unique way, his little niche of getting in the Ironman door in his own way. He'd be really young. And that didn't happen. And then other life takes over, high school, and he just sort of, finished his final year of high school and moving on to college, and he just let it go. And I think it was daunting for him to think about doing it some way that was too close to our way of doing the race. And so I revisited that with him. In 2017, he hiked the Pacific Crest Trail in 2016. 2,650 miles. And that was his way of I think establishing his endurance completely different from his parents. And he'd been involved in rock climbing and things of his own creating. So when after he did the Pacific Crest Trail, I just said, honey, you have shown you've got the endurance to do an Ironman. If you'd like to revisit it, I have to go to Korea in September. If you'd like to come, I will, I'll get you in the race. Mom will pull strings and get you in the race. And so he thought about it. He said, okay. And again, didn't train that much, sort of showed up and won his age group and was able to go to Kona in 2018. So I think we did have a certain kind of I don't know if it was just, I don't know what the word would be. I would say that he always knew he wanted to kind of have a chance at Kona. When I said, do you feel like Ironman is your legacy? And he said, no, Mom, but Kona is. And I said, well, to get to Kona, dude, you have to qualify. So you got to kind of figure this out. And I said, by the way, that 18 to 24 is probably the one age group that still has a lot of flexibility if you're thinking about it. So I think he put two and two together and thought he wanted his shot at Kona, and he got it. And the race did not go well for him. He suffered out there. And I like to say, as I watched him in Korea, he suffered beautifully, but he won his age group. In Kona, he suffered just as beautifully, but he did not have a chance to win his age group. Had he won his age group, maybe that would have fueled a fire to pursue more. But, and so to kind of in 2019, I basically said, I'm going to be doing some half Ironmans. If you'd like to join me on a few, great. And so he managed to qualify for the World Championship in Nice, France in September. And here's another one of those things where I just went to kind of have something to take all that energy from 2018 and just not let it dissipate completely. So I said, I'll focus on the halves. And there we were in Nice, France, the place where his father won 10 Ironmans. 5 in a row, took a year off, then won another 5 in a row. To be sharing with my son such a huge part of his father's career. I mean, the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that strip of Ironman finish line in Nice. For Matt's to be able to experience that with his dad. Again, his father was at the finish line. I got to see him at the finish line. It was kind of, if I had to take 2 moments for my son to kind of say, he's ticked the box, he kind of got them in 2 years' time. So what he does with this in the future, I hope he comes back to it. I could see him being just one of those really annoying, age group athletes who's like, well, of course you're doing well. Look who your parents were.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I'd love to open this up.
Yeah, I'm dying to hear from him.
Yeah. Does anybody have questions for Julie?
Can I ask one? Stephen?
Sure.
Hey, Julie,
Yes.
thanks for coming on and speaking with us. And I just want to ask you, I kind of followed your comeback in the magazines and online and things that were written, but I have to think that your whole mental attitude and preparation was so completely different than it was back in 1982. So how did you approach that and your training for 2017 and 18?
Oh, well, I think when I was young, I was trying to be something I wasn't. I was trying to become a professional athlete. That was really difficult. And I had my entree into the sport because of my finish. And then I had to try and figure out how to become a professional athlete. And I do talk a lot about this in my book. It took me 7 years to put those pieces together to kind of have a world-class championship moment. Most of the time I felt like I was faking it to a degree. Coming back as an age group athlete, I knew that I had every bit as good a chance as anybody else to do well if I put the time and the energy in. I now had a huge base of training. That was really an asset to be able, and to have confidence to know that when I really put my mind to something, I was able to accomplish pretty much close to my goals. What I found in the last couple of years was that it wasn't about going out and just redlining. And I rarely would do that. It was about being steady. It was about more of a consistent heart rate, one to go for endurance so that I could stay steady. So instead of getting off the bike on a transition run and, hurting myself, I'd ease in for the first mile or two. And I would tell myself, if you need to walk for 5 minutes, walk for 5 minutes. Let your heart rate come down a little bit. This is about just being really comfortable with going the entire distance. So I'm all over the map here, but let me just tell you, my basic training was to do mostly brick trainings. To start with a bike, get off the bike and run, and then I'd get to the pool. Mainly because I didn't like getting up early and getting to the pool in the dark. But what I was doing was having a continuous 5 and 6 hour day, which then was like mentally, I can do a half Ironman any day of the week. I'm doing that 3 or 4 times a week. So to train for an Ironman, it just meant I had to add in a longer run on the weekend and one longer bike ride and maybe one longer swim. So instead of thinking of an Ironman as this huge undertaking, I only had to up the ante for 3 workouts. Everything else stayed the same. So I think it was just knowing that I'm going to run the pace. And this is what I meant to say earlier about the transition run, easing in. I'm running the pace I'm going to race. If I'm running 9-minute pace, then I will race at 9-minute pace. I mean, I used to be a much faster runner, weren't we all? And so that's not the runner I am as a triathlete today. I am the kind of runner that can run consistent miles off the bike. So was the huge breakthrough for me, that training then became kind of fun. I wasn't killing myself. I mean, and what the nice part was, Stephen, is that I found when it came to a race day, I had that other gear that would allow me to push and to not hold back. When it got rough, I kept trying to maintain the pace I ran for the first mile through the middle and all the way to the end. So I did have that racing mentality tucked away, but I made sure I didn't pull it out of the bag until the last probably half hour of the run.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions?
I have one. Hi, Julie.
Hi.
So my question is, a prelude, I came to trying Ironman and doing triathlon in general, even any activity, about 7 years ago now, or almost 8 years ago. So I came at it late. I did my first Ironman just before I turned 50. And my question is, I feel like I am sort of stuck in this place because I have 2 autoimmune diseases, that I go into a race and my mentality is just get to the finish line without ending up in the medical tent, because that has been my history. I end up in the medical tent every single time. And so this year I signed up for Ironman Canada. Right now they say the race is on. We don't know that for absolute sure, but they're planning for it. Anyway, so I'm still training. And I had this thought in my head, like, why am I doing this? Sort of like what Hillary was talking about. Why am I doing this? Why am I training so hard? It might get canceled. But behind that has been a longer term question that I'd love to hear your thoughts on is, what if you're not competitive? Like I'll never be competitive. My diseases hold me at a place where the best idea for me, if I want to participate, is just get in under each of the cutoff times for each event, have a safe, fun race, and expect to kind of be there right before it turns midnight. You know, getting in there and being able to walk across that finish line on my own power and walk away on my own power without ending up being carted off to a medical tent or in the hospital. And if that's something that other people face, not because of medical conditions, but because don't want to suffer so much, you know, go into that red line place or push so hard and suffer so beautifully, as you said. Do you see anything wrong with that mentality of just wanting to do it for the joy of it, but not the competition of it?
I think you're so far ahead of the game. I think you've figured this out, and it's almost like you need to give yourself permission to say, this is exactly why you should be competing. I think, again, I think it's to have that standing on a podium is fleeting. I mean, it's nice in the moment, but that's not what you look back on and you say, this was really meaningful for me in a race. And this is just my personal opinion, because in Nice this year in the half Ironman, I didn't get on the podium. I missed it by several spots. And that was okay, because I knew that I had given the best performance that I could, and I had joy in my race, and I was able to push. I mean, I knew somebody in my age group went ahead of me. I could see it, but I thought, this is the pace that I feel like is my best pace. I hung on to a kernel of joy as I was racing, and I wasn't going to let that evaporate into something that it wasn't. And the truth is, you can go from being joyful and well within yourself, and in 5 minutes, now you are walking, right? You've completely pushed too far, and this is what you're left with. And so, and now in my training, a lot of times if mentally a long run feels like it's too much, I will run 20 minutes, walk 5. Run 20 minutes, walk 5. So I'm giving myself permission to understand that part of an Ironman is walking. And that when I do walk, I can look around a little bit more. I can kind of take things in differently. I can use the restroom without having to worry about stopping my watch or get drinks and nutrition. So I kind of take every day and build in a little piece of what might be considered a miss in an Ironman. You know, you had to walk. But going back to you specifically, I think that it's up to you to find ways that I think you are competitive. I think you're competitive when you know that you're going to enter something and you know it's going to push yourself, and you're even taking a risk that you could end up in a medical tent just based on your own unique situation. So for you to take all those factors and to say, what I'm going to focus on here is making the cutoffs. Absolutely. I think that's a very high level of racing. You're taking what you know to be true about yourself and you're pushing it. That's competitive to me. I mean, if I were to meet you for coffee before a race and you would tell me your exact same story, I would say, girlfriend, you got it going on. This is a really perfect scenario for you. I think so many people miss out on that. They're judged by how they compare to their age group and their times. When you've got a very deep understanding of yourself to say, this is a challenge enough for me. Now, within getting to the finish line, how can I do this? Hang on to some joyfulness and hang on to the ability that I come to this late in life and look what I'm doing. I mean, you're good. I'm not good. There's nothing I can find wrong with what you're saying. And I don't mean wrong, but it's competitiveness presents itself in different forms. And I think we shouldn't competitive shame ourselves. ourselves by when we know we're undertaking something that takes a huge commitment. It takes time, it takes energy. And we are trying to bring our best out in a race. That to me could be a good barometer for you. Is this bringing out my best in that I'm taking care of myself, I'm keeping myself safe, but I'm also out here doing something that very few people would even consider. You got the win-win thing down.
Hillary knows this, but we've been talking about this subject off and on because I started doing ultra marathons, and as the distances get longer and longer, that place that you go into, you stop for. I've forgotten about rules of like you should be running this the whole time. Nobody runs these distances the whole time except for those very few elite runners that are running 100 miles all in once under 18 hours or under 15 hours, whatever they're doing it in. The rest of us, we're walking. We're walking.
Yeah, I'm obsessed. Excuse me, I'm obsessed with ultra marathoning because I haven't done it. Again, watching my son hike the PCT and seeing, day after day, that appeals to me. That walking day after day and getting in that rhythm of just being out in nature and movement. I think I can see the draw with ultra marathoning because it's sort of taking the competitive concept out. So you're not being burdened by that. You're just having to figure out a way to get to the finish line, not end up in a medical tent, and to have the time, the ability to look around, see things. I mean, that's when you walk, you get to see so much more. So no, I think that's probably a good thing you've come to this later in life. You haven't worn out those joints. I mean, I literally proudly say I've worn out my hip and probably the other side too. I mean, I've just literally, and I pushed past the physical discomfort. And when I was racing in Nice, I can't even believe my hip is allowing me to do this. And it's been allowing me to do this for the last 2 years. And it has been there and I have pushed it out. And now I look at the idea of, I'm just not jealous, but I'm so happy that you found this niche that really expresses who you are. Ultra marathoning, obviously, a very small percentage of the people want to take this on. But the fact that you've come to sport late is such an advantage, and that you found that this really is truly, really speaks to who you are on a core level of being able to just get to the finish line. I mean, it's cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. I feel like we could go on like this for hours, and I know your time is limited. So
well, I have to hear from Brad before he goes. He's got to talk to me.
Oh, of course.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
I just have two comments.
Okay.
One, do your hip exercises. Are you doing your hip exercises? Because I had a bad hip, and it's coming back slowly.
Good.
And my second one, the comment was, I've seen you so many times at Wildflower, at Eagleman, and in Nice and Kona. In 2017, I raced in Kona, and I saw you before the race. And knowing you, I went up and wished you luck, and you wished me luck. But you did not seem like you, the Julie that I knew from so many times. So maybe it was destined from the very start that you were going to have a bad day.
I was allowing myself to be the athlete, maybe mimicking, Mark Allen all those years, seeing him before the start of Ironman, and I was trying to hold my energy in. I remember that in the beginning of the race, and trying to not let it go, too much. And that's really not who I am. You're right. You interesting that you shared that with me. If I had heard that before, Brad, you would have been in the book. Yeah. I would have used that quote. Darn it. Because I love those anecdotes, right? That when people can see you're getting it wrong and you're just blind to it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's great.
Brad, thank you. I feel like you've been part of my Ironman Ohana for years. I feel we all share. Stephen, and I love that shadow box on your wall. Boy, that was beautifully done with your medal and your pictures. So I feel we're all part of a family here.
Yeah.
And so it's something that I'm proud of. I'm proud to say that my Ironman Ohana is, we share on such a deep level. We really are connected on a very deep level. And it's an honor to be part of this family.
And it's an honor to have you, Julie. We really appreciate it on behalf of We Are Triathletes. And thank you so much.
Well, we
And
are triathletes.
we are.
You're
All right.
welcome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Stay
Hi,
healthy.
Julie.
Bye.
Thank you.